Hello everyone and welcome. Today we'll be doing a Kokonoe run at 100 Transcendence Entropy difficulty. My Mind Crystal setup is more or less the same as it usually is. The only things I've changed around for this run in particular is I switched over to using the combo damage Mind Crystal. And that's because in Transcendence, the bosses end up getting a crazy amount of HP. By the end of the run, they'll have 200, 300k HP, and then the Susanoo fight will have 500k for each individual phase. So they get really tanky if you don't have a whole lot of damage. And then on top of that, the setup we're running for Legacy Tactics doesn't quite have as good of DPS as something like a Frost or a Rend build would. So we need that extra damage bonus for both reasons, and also Koko can stack up the damage, or the combo count pretty high, even if I am messing up and taking an occasional hit, so it's mostly just a win-win Mind Crystal for her. She's not going to lose out too much on it, even if I make a mistake. Oh, my legacy characters are backwards, but you know what, let's just, we're like 2 seconds into the run, let's just restart it anyways. I like having my Jin on my left trigger instead of right trigger, just for muscle memory reasons. So this legacy setup is something I talked about in the past. It's a Thunder and Lightning build, is what I refer to it as. It's an extremely well-rounded build that does both good at... the thing it does really well is AoE damage for clearing out regular rooms, and then it still does some boss damage on top of that. The room clearing works out by... every time I hit an enemy, they're marked with a... or every time I hit an enemy with a skill, they're marked with a lightning impulse. Then when that enemy dies, they'll kind of explode into some extra AoE damage. So early on, a couple things I'm looking for is... one of the things is this upgrade. It'll make the base skill much stronger by allowing it to pierce enemies. Usually one of the big problems with her base skill is that unless enemies are all stacked up into one spot, you're wasting a lot of the damage because it's not doing AoE damage at all. All of the missiles just end up kind of hitting one enemy, whereas if I press it here, it deletes the entire line of enemies. It's a really useful thing to find early on. Some of the other early things you can find are... there's an upgrade for her jump attacks that make it where splashes are spawned when you're doing the jump attacks, and those do a surprising amount of DPS, especially with something like Attack Chain Lightning. It'll also do a lot of hits to help summon those. If you get the splashes early on, you will have no problems at all just clearing out the early rooms by doing nothing but jump attack into dash attack like that. Otherwise, you could find things like Banishing Rays, these right here. You could find Heaven's Judgment, which is her up plus skill potential. Any of those things will help out a lot early on. So anyways, back to the tactic setup I'm using. Anytime a skill hits an enemy, they'll get marked, and then you can see right there how they're kind of exploding into an extra lightning burst, which will deal damage to enemies around them, and then since I have one of the upgrades for lightning impulses, it will also, anytime an enemy is hit by an impulse, they'll apply impulses to other enemies near them. So this lets the impulses just have this huge chain reaction effect where Even if you kill an enemy like on one side of the screen, it can end up chaining to enemies all the way across the screen. Here we pretty much just, if we're doing the laser attack, it's on the base skill, it's probably just killing all the enemies anyways, so we're not really seeing the chain reactions too much. But if I didn't get that early on, the impulses would be doing a lot more work. And I think Kokonoe's early clearing can be really awkward if you don't get some of the right potentials early on. So having this setup is something that makes it where Kokonoe feels really good to play right out of the gate. You won't have any problems with like running out of timer in the first area, or just feeling like you're struggling to get through the early stages. And then with the red effect, Thunder and Lightning, these impulses can also be triggered by hitting an enemy with Chain Lightning, which is what's on our attacking slot for tactics. Anytime a Chain Lightning hits an enemy, it will also trigger an impulse, and then, again, because we have one of the upgrades for impulses, here, I'll just show it real quick. The Pulsing Lightning upgrade. When an impulse hits an enemy, inflicts lightning on them for 6 seconds. When they're eliminated, it deals damage. So what happens is this Thunder and Lightning will proc the impulse, but then if I'm on like a boss, the Pulsing Lightning will put that impulse back onto the boss. So I can trigger this as many times as I want, as long as I never let the impulse duration run out. You can basically think of it as you have Frost Burst, even though you're not running a Frost build, you're running a Lightning build. And that's one of the things that makes this build really strong. You get all of the AoE benefits from the Chain Lightning stuff and the Lightning impulses, but then you also do get some pretty high boss damage on top of it. It doesn't feel quite as high DPS as if you're running like Frost and Frost Burst, but it is a high DPS source, even in boss fights. So in shops, I'm only looking for things that are 150 and are on these two slots, unless they're on sale. If they're on sale, I'll probably pick them up anywhere. We could go for Legacy Flash. Legacy Flash has a really good red effect with Holy Marks. That is a really good source of defensive. So the reason why I go for these two slots in particular is these two will always be stuff like potentials, HP and MP, that type of thing. This slot can sometimes be debuff removal for some reason, but it's not too common. And then these two slots will always be stuff like debuff removal, HP, and mixtures. And then the reason why I'm mostly buying stuff that's 150 is that 150 is the cost of a potential, and potentials are the thing I really want during the run. They're the most important source of a run after you've already gotten your tactics put together, which my tactics are already put together in my legacy characters. We don't really have a good way to proc the Chain Lightning during the fights yet, so I'm mostly going to be relying on Vanishing Rays, which is a little bit annoying, unless I can get something like a Jin freeze or his time stop, but that's a big reason why I take Jin, just aside from being generally overpowered. Hey, I made a pun without even realizing it. He's generally overpowered as a legacy character. But anyways, there's a couple ways you can deal with bosses as Kokonoe. With this setup, we mostly have to rely on Banishing Rays. And I think Banishing Rays are also... they're a very good, cost-efficient source of DPS on bosses, if you can get the boss to the point of where he's sitting on them and taking a lot of damage from them. Otherwise, if the boss is moving around a lot, some other things like Heaven's Judgment can be a little bit better. But you kind of just, in 100 or 100 Transcendence or 100 Entropy, especially, you kind of just have to play around what you're given. So one of the nice things you can do with Rachel's second legacy skill, the Tempest Dahlia, is you can really easily throw enemies into traps, like I did there. I just threw everything into the spikes. Traps in general are something you really want to pay attention to if you're doing high entropy stuff. If you have a good way of throwing an enemy into a trap, then it will always be a consistent source of one-shotting enemies. Tempest Dahlia is also going to be something that's really nice, just in general, on Kokonoe. She really benefits from being able to have all the enemies grouped up together in one spot like that, where I can just put like a couple of Banishing Rays in the corner, or I can put like a Heaven's Judgment down in the corner and just throw all the enemies into it at once with Kokonoe. So here's one of the other upgrades I mentioned. It's just a very strong upgrade on her in general. You'd be surprised at how much damage this actually does. It's the jump upgrade where you generate splashes, so you can see all these additional hits that are coming out as I do my jump attacks now. It's going to be something that, like I said, it deals a lot of damage on its own, and then these hits are going to be counted towards proccing the Chain Lightning. So now we have a good way to set up the Chain Lightning as well. So you can see here, even if I just do jump attacks, then I melt through the enemies really quickly with this upgrade. It's basically to the point of, like, being the Noelle upgrade, where she gets the upgraded damage on her heavy attack. It just makes such a big difference in your gameplay as soon as you get it. Also, another thing you can look out for with Koko is if you have your triple dashes and your components unlocked, another playstyle you can do is just teleporting around the screen a bunch to set up a bunch of the components and then explode them. Components are another really good source of damage. They're a little bit harder to set up at first until you get the triple dash with the teleports, but then once you get the teleports, you're pretty much good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and take the heal there. I don't really need Ascensions for anything, and healing is a lot harder to come by in high entropy, because one of the settings completely reduces, or completely removes all of the healing you get after killing a boss. By default, you get a full heal anytime you beat a boss, and then as you start raising the entropy setting, you get less and less, to the point of where you don't get anything. So that's one of the reasons why I take the mixture stuff that I do. It helps get rid of any chip damage that might happen over the run. So I think Lightning Orb Timer is probably fine here. Lightning Orb will also go into Chain Lightning, if I can get the... Here, I'll just show it. If I can get Chain Lightning fully upgraded, the Lightning Orbs will also proc Chain Lightning, which will be another source of proccing the Thunder and Lightning for me automatically. It'll make more impulses go off, which will just increase my overall damage. That part of the build isn't necessary. It's not like to the point of where I would run extra Thunder Chance or anything to get it, but if I see it, then it's something it's worth picking up. Other options for tactics you can look for are stuff like Legacy Black Hole works really well on Koko, since she benefits a lot from having enemies grouped together, which every character is obviously going to benefit from that. It's just kind of something that's generally good. But Koko in particular, it all depends on which potentials you're getting to. If you're not getting the potentials for like splashes, or if you're not getting a setup where you can set down components quickly, or some of the other stuff, she can have a little bit of a hard time clearing out the regular stages efficiently. Alright, I really didn't play that fight too well, but we didn't really take too much damage out of it, so it's not that big of a deal. I should have had a lot more Banishing Rays down during the fight. The one thing you just kind of have to deal with in high entropy is the buffs. As you can see over on the right side, I have a lot of buffs stacked up at this point. If you can start going into rest spaces early on, each rest space you visit will remove up to 2. Each rest space will remove up to 2 debuffs. So if you can kind of get ahead of things, you can start dealing with the debuffs before they start stacking up. But at this point, there's too many stacked up. Most of the debuffs you can pretty much just ignore. Stuff like Afterlife Bombs and MP Regen are a lot more annoying, depending on what character you're playing. But now at the point at where I'm at, it's going to be difficult to remove those without getting lucky. So that's something you want to think about too, is even if the debuffs that you have aren't too bad, you need to think about later on too. If you get a new debuff later on that you really do want to remove, and you didn't remove debuffs earlier, you're going to have a harder time getting that debuff removed, the newer one, just because you're going to have so many debuffs stacked up by that point. The most efficient way of removing debuffs is just to perfect kill a boss. If you manage to kill a boss without taking any damage, you'll remove all debuffs at once, and you'll get a buff as well. So this is the other set of Koko potentials that you can look to get into. Generally, the earlier you get into it, the better, but pretty much any of her build paths that I've talked about will get you through the early stages, as long as you've got a decent set of tactics to work with to help you out early on. For Heaven's Judgment, you really want the tracking upgrade, but that's another thing where if you're in 100, you just have to take what you get for it. Having any of the upgrades for it is nice, because you'll want all of them at some point. So since I got these splash upgrades and the components, I can kind of just play Kokonoe just by dashing around the screen a bunch, doing air attacks into dash attacks, and then exploding the components, but depending on what kind of setup you get stuck with, you'll have to focus a lot more on setting up Banishing Rays and the Heaven's Judgment. I took a lot of damage there. Hopefully I can get a little bit of a heal off of the Sortisho. If not, I have my mixtures as well. I do have the debuff that lowers my mixture healing, but even then, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. With these Mind Crystals, the extra mixture healing, it makes it where mixtures heal for so much HP. We'll see it as soon as I finally end up having to use one. That actually removed Afterlife Bombs, so I got lucky with that one. The Killstreak damage reduction is also really bad. It's a pretty heavy damage cut, if I remember right. And if I lose my Killstreak during a boss fight, I don't have any way of getting it back. But the combo damage that we have should more than offset that. And then the other big debuff I have right now is the MP recovery speed reduction. That one, for Kokonoe in particular, is a little more painful to deal with. So one thing to keep in mind is that if you look up at the top left, you can see what stage number you're on. Well, we're on stage 3, and then we're on, I don't know what you would call this, like, we're on stage 8 of this section. Every time you're on stage 8, the top space will always be an exchange. Even if it's hidden, it's always going to be a guaranteed exchange. If you have the money for it, it's usually worth it to go into exchanges right before the boss fight. Especially if you have the discount, because you can get stuff like free healing and free mixtures, which will help you out right before the boss fight. But anytime we get something like a Jin freeze, like here, if we can get a couple of the Banishing Rays set up, that's the main kind of objective. Especially if I can get the actual Jin freeze from the Legacy itself. Or if I can get a stun on the boss. Unfortunately, he got pushed there. And then also, in the downtime, I can also use a bit of the Heaven's Judgment lasers to get some extra damage in. And I can also explode the components occasionally. There is an effect between Banishing Rays and the components, where the components also will set off a Banishing Ray every time you use it. It will only be one, it won't be the entire duration, but that's also something to keep in mind when playing Koko. So if I have them down and I use Banishing Ray, I get an extra attack off of them. So I don't really want to... I want to blow them up after I do that, rather than before, obviously. We also just picked up another potential, which makes it where the components leave behind fire now, every time they explode. This fire is going to be another really good source of setting off the chain lightning, which the build kind of relies on to deal a lot of its damage. And then also it just makes it a better source of taking out regular enemies. I've had really good luck during this run. Getting the triple dash and the components and the splashes early on are really ideal, in my opinion. I like the playstyle with the components and the splashes more so than the skill spam one, or having to set up the Banishing Rays all over the screen. One thing you do have to be a little careful about with... Oh, I took damage somewhere again. I'm probably gonna have to heal this back. If I can make it through this room first. There we go. One thing that's difficult about trying to do commentary while playing is I'm a lot less aware of when I'm taking damage than I usually would be. So I think I'm gonna keep going down light. Upgrading the Chain Lightning itself doesn't really matter a whole lot. Actually, let me check how close I am. I still need 2 more for light, and I still need a lot more to get the Lightning Orb Thunder as well, so I'll go down light for now. It's basically, at this point, between... If I keep going down the Thunder route, I'll do a little bit more damage, and I'll have more AoE from the extra Chain Lightning procs. But if I go down the light route, then I'll have a little bit more safety, because the flashes will automatically be applying. I'll explain how that setup works if I end up getting it. It's just a red effect between Holy Marks and Legacy Flash. So I believe I need to... Okay, I need to max out the flashes, not the Holy Marks. I like having extra exchange points for the shops, but I could also chance this on being either light or a potential... Oh, it's an exchange. That's not the best thing, but it's not the worst either. I can get a free mixture out of it and some extra HP. I could also just go ahead and buy this buff, but I'll keep it at 150 in case I hit another shop. I don't play 100 Entropy too often, so I'm not real well versed into the decision-making process of how to pick spaces compared to regular when you can see all the spaces. Ideally, I don't really want to shop there, because like I said, I always have the guaranteed shop in the last stage before the boss fight, which is stage 8. So here's what we were looking for. Enemies inflicted with Holy Mark have a chance to trigger Flash when they attack or take a hit. That'll just let Flash go off automatically, even if I'm not pressing my legacy skill buttons. I think I also picked up Flash Enhancement, which makes Flash deal a little bit of extra damage when it goes off too. The damage isn't anything too significant, but having some extra bonus damage is never a bad thing. Where'd my components go? Did they, like, fall under the map somehow? I know I dashed there. Up there again, my components just didn't spawn. I wonder if that's some kind of bug. It's not really a big deal, but it could have gotten me a little screwed over if I needed them to kill something before I took a hit or something. Ah, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to touch the ground before my skill went off, but I pressed it too early. Once I've gotten some of the other stuff, like the Heaven's Judgment Laser and the Banishing Rays, I don't tend to use her base skill nearly as often. It's not bad, I just prefer the other ones. Especially once you've gotten the upgrade where the base skill can be used on its own as soon as you dash. It's a pretty effective thing to throw in every so often. Honestly, with the upgrade that gives it lasers, it might even be more effective than the Heaven's Judgment in some cases. Like in a stage like this, it's really good because there's no platforms or anything for the enemies to be away from it. It's just going to hit the entire stage. Wait, what am I... My lightning orbs were not stuck to me, I just noticed. They were stuck over in the corner somehow. So now we do actually want to just finish off the chain lightning. That way we get to the other rut effect. Yeah, see, the lightning orbs aren't attached to me for some reason. You do want to try and upgrade the impulses as fast as possible. Because that's where most of your damage is coming from, is the impulses with the red effect. The chain lightning itself does some damage, but it's not doing as much as the red effect of the impulses. And then if you're not inheriting the first, or if you're not inheriting the final upgrade, what's going on here? Is my clone... Is my clone from my base skill getting lightning orbs? How did I never know about that? Huh. I knew some of Hibiki's clones got summon tactics, but I didn't know that Kokonoe's did. That's an interesting little Easter egg. There's a couple of those around where certain character moves will have specific interactions with a certain potential. But anyways, you really want the third upgrade for the impulses if you're trying to do the Thunder and Lightning build. It's what really makes the build work, aside from the Thunder and Lightning red effect itself. And by the third upgrade, I mean the final one on the tactic tree, where... I'll just show it again. You want this, where impulse... When your impulse hits an enemy, it inflicts another impulse onto them, basically. The wording of all this stuff is confusing, because they use lightning, attack lightning, and skill lightning, but then there's also skill lightning chain. So I usually refer to this as chain lightning, and then this is lightning impulse. It makes things a little bit more understandable. You can also put the impulses on your legacy slot. They're a little bit harder to get applied that way, though. I like having them on the skill slot instead. But if you do want to put them on the legacy slot, you could put them on a Lambda Evo type, since her... Let me actually just focus for this boss fight, so I don't do anything stupid. I need to set up Jin's legacy. I can maybe... Okay, we barely got that off. I needed to heal. Now we can just get a bunch of Vanishing Rays stacked in place, and it should pretty much delete her. Man, I don't know if it's just from the extra pressure of doing commentary, but I'm just not realizing when I'm taking damage right now. It was almost too late by the time I realized I was almost dead there. Not really extra pressure from doing commentary. That's not really the right word for it. I don't really feel like pressured, it's just the extra strain of having to multitask between doing commentary and playing the game at the same time. Oh, I shouldn't have taken that. That was 125. I wasn't paying attention. Honestly, upgrading the flash enhancement isn't the worst thing. because this will be happening automatically quite often, and I should have picked up the extra buff on the end there. That slot on the end of the shop will always be a buff for 50. %50 chance of buffs plus 3. I'd rather just take the HP cut. A 30% HP cut really isn't anything significant at all. And now I don't think there's really much of a reason to waste resources in terms of like HP and mixtures to start going into the extra stages here. If this wasn't Floating Mind, I might take an additional boss, but even then, I usually end up just going straight through Susano. Also, a really big thing you have to think about in high entropy is the timer as well. On this run, I got a really good setup early on, and my tactic setup lets me do a lot of AoE damage to regular rooms, so I cleared with plenty of time on the timer. But that's something you really have to think about when considering if you're going to do extra rooms or not. Okay, I should probably get out of there before... I don't know if my invincibility would run out, and if his hitbox would still be active because of the gen slow or not. Did I ever get the Seeking upgrade for my Heaven's Laser? I don't think I did. That's a little bit of an issue, but it's not that bad, since we have other stuff to make up for it. Okay, and at this point, I should probably just stop doing commentary, and I need to focus on the Susano fight itself, so I don't throw, which I might throw even when I'm focused. But anyways, enjoy the rest of the fight. Okay, there we go. That is Transcendence 100 beaten. Susanoo isn't particularly a difficult boss fight when it comes to Kokonoe, because her mobility is just so high. A lot of Susanoo's moves, if you're in the air, you're safe from them, and the ones that you're not are pretty easy to get away from. The main thing of that fight is just attrition, because he has 500,000 HP on each phase, so he has a total of 1.5 million HP. It can be a real problem to get through on characters that aren't quite as high DPS as Koko. Also, that's the one place where I feel the damage difference between running something like a Frost and Rend build compared to running the Thunder and Lightning build in terms of DPS. If I had Frost there, that fight would go a lot quicker. But Frost is, but what the Thunder and Lightning build does is it just gives you a ton of consistency. It makes clearing the early stages of the run really easy, and it makes clearing out all of the normal rooms feel really easy and smooth. So you end up having a huge time save there compared to the time loss you do end up getting on Susanoo. And like I said, just having that extra smoothness through the early game and extra consistency through the early game is something that I feel like Koko really benefits from. She's a character that, as long as you can get up to a certain amount of potentials, she will always just kind of take off on her own just base values of damage and just the utility of all of her attacks. So as long as you can get her going, she's strong. The difficult part is usually just getting her to that point. And that's where the Thunder and Lightning build really helps you get to that point easily. Anyways, that'll be it for this one. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.